Yes.
It's another question and answer time.
Oh, snap.
The last time we did question and answer time, we did our favorite home console of all time. Mine was the Sony PlayStation 2, and yours was the Microsoft Xbox 360. Stupid name, but decent console. That kind of goes for any Microsoft console. But anyway, we're past consoles. Now, what we're going to discuss is, what's your favorite handheld of all time?
That's hard. I think I've owned more handheld systems than I've owned home consoles. Because I had the Game Boy Color, I had the Game Boy Advanced, Game Boy SP, the original DS, the DS.
Well, I would count the Advance and the SP are like the same platform.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily talking about models. I'm more talking about like.
So you'd consider DS, DSi, and DS Lites all one?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can definitely. I mean, if you have like a particular model, because I think we did that with. Well, we were talking about our consoles that we liked. I think you liked the original Xbox 360.
The Halo 3 limited edition one, and I think that was an original.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my favorite PS2 is the slim PS2. So yeah. What's your favorite handheld? And also, if there's a different model to pick from, which one's your favorite?
I think I'm one of the very few people who think this, but I think, or my favorite handheld is probably the DS. My favorite model is probably the original, and I don't know very many grown people or people over the age of 20 who, I don't know, probably who had a DS, or I don't know, people are uncomfortable saying things that they had, like
because
having hand consoles.
Because we live in a day and age where the internet is a merciless playground of torment. But back to happier talk.
I don't know how many people would say the original.
Not many. I would definitely
No,
say.
because it was bulky. It was
the screen on it was lousy, very lousy screen.
It was also, I think, the smallest screen.
I think it only looked small because of how large the rest of the unit is. But I do think that it probably had the best sound of any of the original DS models, because it did have some bigger speakers on it.
Yeah, I think the reason why that one was probably my favorite was because I had a Game Boy SP for a really long time, and up until the DS, that would probably have been my favorite portable console, just because I liked the little square. Just, I don't know, it felt good in my hand when I was little, of course, because it's big. Sure, if I were to hold one now, it'd be kind of small.
What, the original one, or you're talking about the light?
The SP?
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about DS's still.
Yeah,
Game Boy Advance SP though was comfortable.
Yeah. It also, at the time, one of my favorite colors was red. And a lot of my favorite games for probably Nintendo consoles are probably on the SP, because I had Pokemon Ruby, Pokemon Leaf Green, one of the Mario and Luigi RPG games, Yoshi, I think it was Yoshi's, maybe in Yoshi's Island?
Game Boy Advance?
Yeah.
They did port that
Yeah. Yoshi's Island. I had... Oh, man, what was it? I know I had a few other games on there. But I really liked those. And my brother had switched to a DS a while before I had, and he kept trying to sell me on it. He kept trying to tell me, I was like, oh, the games for it are so much better. It's such a better feel in your hand. But I had such a strong attachment to my Game Boy Advanced games that I didn't want to get rid of it. He didn't tell me that I could play those on the original DS because he didn't have any of his because I think he had traded in his SP and then like all of his games, and then like my mom helped him get his DS. What can I do?
I know, but when you do that,
I also have no connection to my video games. They're all just there to entertain me until it's like I'm a ruthless king and my video games are servants. You know, as soon as one stops entertaining me, just sell it. Which is a it's
so sad.
Very brutal
you have issues.
Vision for a game console.
So one of us has issues here, and I'm pretty sure it's not me when it comes to that.
Absolutely got issues. But yeah, and then as soon as I found that out, and my mom found out that I kind of wanted one, she got me one for Christmas. She got me a red one too, and it came with Mario Kart. I forget.
Mario Kart DS.
Yeah, that's right. They didn't have
dumb
numbers then. Yeah.
Because I mean, Mario Kart 64 obviously is the later one than Mario Kart 8.
Oh yeah. I don't know why we went back.
I know.
But yeah, it was the Mario Kart DS version, and it came with a bunch of stickers on it, or a bunch of stickers you could put on it, which I thought was kind of cool. But I think I put them all on, and then I thought that like other kids would make fun of me, so I basically took everything off other than the M because I was like, my name is Matthew. And for some reason I thought that other people couldn't tell the difference between the Mario M and just a regular M sticker. But
yeah, the Mario M is it's pretty iconic.
Oh yeah. But oh man, I loved that thing so much. And the games that you could get for it too. Some of my favorites are Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. I think it was Dragon Quest
9.
9?
9 came to the DS.
Was that the first one?
I think it was the only numbered one that came to the DS.
Yeah, I got that. I got a few. I think there was another Mario and Luigi.
There's Bowser's
RPG.
Inside Story. I know that was one of the.
I don't know if it was Bowser's Inside Story. I think it may have been the one where they team up with their baby selves.
Partners in Time.
Yeah, Partners in Time.
Okay.
I got Sonic Rush, which that was actually a pretty enjoyable game.
Oh yeah.
There's Rocket Slime. It was probably one of my favorite games at the time. It's such a fun game. It was a spin-off of Dragon Quest, where like one of the basic enemies in Dragon Quest is the slime. And I'm sure if you were to see an image of it, you'd probably be able to know. It's like, oh, I've seen that before. I don't know if people would know that it's from Dragon Quest, but they made a game surrounding it. And basically, it's you have a team of I can't remember how. I think it may be like a team of 4 or 5 people, in a tank, and you basically go around like different areas around this world, and you pick up weapons, you pick up new teammates that can assist you, you try and customize your tank, and basically at the end of a level you fight an enemy tank, and you can throw different items you find around the world. You can send them back to your tank through these like little cargo carts, and you can send them back to your tank so that when you fight in a tank fight, you can use those. You can throw them in your cannons. You had 3 cannons, I believe, and you can use those, or you can just put yourself in there and use yourself as a projectile, which I thought was pretty cool. There was also like parts leading up to the tank fight. You were just a little slime, and you was like a little team of like, I think it may have been like 2 or 3 people that you could like alternate, and you just like, you stretched out with the stylus, and you would just like do like this weird like slime rush attack, and it was just such a fun game when I was a kid. And I remember them not coming out with any more, and it made me really sad. Like a year later, I hear that they made a sequel to it, and then there was like a 3rd one for like, but it was like a pirate ship version that's coming out. It came out either like last year or this year, but they were only in Japan because Rocket Slime didn't sell that well in America, and that made me really sad. That was probably one of my favorite games on there, though. I think my favorite game of all time for the DS is probably Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days.
Yeah, definitely not recoded.
That made me angry. That made me so angry because I saw it. I didn't see, like, for 358 over 2 days, they had so much, like, advertising for it.
Right.
And
recoded was like, I think they made an announcement, but they did not market it.
I didn't remember hearing anything about it. And I remember when I first saw it, I was like, oh my goodness, this just came out. I want to play it, because 358 over 2 days was like one of the best looking portable Kingdom Hearts games that had come out. Granted, I think there had only been like 2.
No, you're right. Yeah, because there was Chain Memories on the Game Boy Advance, and this was the second one. And it was also the first one that had any kind of multiplayer element to it.
I also played the heck out of that with 2 of my buddies in middle school. Whenever we, early in the mornings, going to school, we would pull out our DSs, and we would just play the multiplayer of that. But we would just play, I think, like, the multiplayer is like, you're supposed to kill all the Heartless, or
yeah, you have
Heartless
like
and Nobodies, and then like you go on. We would just play tag. We'd pick our favorite characters, and then like we would do like rock paper scissors, and then whoever lost, like, they had to count to, like, I think you could only stay in like an area for like maybe 5 or 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So like they had to count for like 20 seconds, and the other 2 of us, we just like ran around like Twilight Town.
So it sounds like more like hide and go seek rather than tag.
Oh, yeah. That was really fun. And I had gotten really into Kingdom Hearts around that time, thanks to a kid in the neighborhood of mine. And when I saw that game, I was just like immediately into it. Like, I watched, that may have been one of the first videos I'd ever like watched videos on to like get everything, because they kind of had like a, like, you could put little chips in for Roxas to like make him stronger.
They're like little Tetris blocks. You
Yeah.
had like a grid, and as you get leveled up and got stronger, more of that grid would become open, so you could like fit stuff around. It was a neat idea, and they never repeated that idea in any Kingdom Hearts game, so it's unique to that game.
It was very similar to the Mega Man Battle Network games, I believe. They did something like that in one of their later games. They had an idea like that to give Mega Man like different elemental forms when he started out. But I had watched YouTube videos to get like all the best like little Tetris pieces, and I'd even like, I got curious to see, just because in like one of the last, I think it was the last mission, you're fighting Riku and a bunch of Heartless using both Oathkeeper and Oblivion, and I wanted to know if you could do that in multiplayer mode, and I found that you could, and like the Keyblades weren't Keyblades, they were like little Tetris pieces. They were called gears, and oh my gosh, I had to go back and do like 3 like of some of the hardest missions, and 100% complete them, and that took me a long time. And then I finally got the 0 gear, and then there were 3 chips that you had to put in the correct order in order to get in order to dual wield. But you could only visually see it in multiplayer. You couldn't like do the story missions while dual wielding, which kind of made me sad.
Yeah, dual wielding's only like available for like one battle during the story, and it's amazing when it happens. You're just like, why can't I do this in a normal game?
But I remember when we played, when me and my friends played while riding on our bus, they lost their minds when they saw me running around with both my hood up as Roxas and dual wielding keyblades. And they're just like, how did you do that? I can't figure it out. How did you do that? I was just like, I am the best.
I am amazing.
But yeah, the DS was just, so good. Sorry, my ADD, like, I'll start out somewhere, and then it just turns into it just branches off. And I'll go this direction, then I'll go back, and then go that way, and then go back, and then go that way, and then just branch off even more. And I talked about so many other things other than the DS.
Well, I mean, the library is a big reason for liking a system. So,
I also remember using the PictoChat. Me and my brother and my sister, we all had DSs, and like some of the only times that all 3 of us ever got along was whenever we were playing video games together, and we'd go into like PictoChat late at night when our parents would like tell us to go to bed. We would just lay in our beds and we would just talk to each other and just like write funny things and like draw things. And
yeah, that was one thing about the original DS that I was like, hey, this is actually pretty cool. Just being able to send messages and like, you know, it's so funny right now. The Samsung Galaxy Note 8, like the main feature that they're pushing and they're advertising is, oh, you can draw pictures and send them to other Galaxy Note 8s. It's just like, really? Yeah, that's over a decade old thing from the Nintendo DS. So, great being an innovator there, Samsung. So, my turn?
yes.
All right, so sorry in advance because this is going to be a long video because I can't just jump to my favorite. I kind of have to go through my history of handhelds because handhelds, I love handhelds, and when I run into someone who doesn't, they're like, I don't play handhelds. I'm just like, how can you not like handhelds? Like, it's just more games for you to play. To me, playing it on a handheld, like, I had a handheld. I had a Nintendo. Yes, but we only had like 4 games for it. And then when I was 5, my dad got me a Game Boy. I think they had only been out for about a year when he got it for me. And I just would get like a couple games, maybe 3 or 4 games a year. Like that was like a really good year if I got like 4 games. Like 2 for my birthday, 2 for Christmas. But a lot of times just 1 and 1. But that was for some reason, Game Boy games, you couldn't rent them like anywhere. Blockbuster only had console games that you could rent. So when I got games, I basically just had to go off the box art or off the property. And sometimes that worked for me in my favor. A lot of times it didn't, though. Like Tiny Toon Adventures, like Bab's Big Break was like one of my favorite like original Game Boy games. So I grew up with the original Game Boy with the green screen. I was like a little electrical engineer, but a crazy one, because what I would do so the original Game Boy ran on 4 AA's, and if those went dead, it was usually a few weeks before my parents would like buy me some more batteries. I didn't have the Game Boy, the adapter that allowed you to plug it into the wall, so I just didn't play video games for a little while. Then they would get me batteries, and like, you know, it lasted like 20 hours, which for me was like 3 months before they'd run out again. But I had ways of getting those batteries, of stretching the battery. I would do things like, especially in the summer, I have fond memories of playing Warrior Land, Super Mario Land 3. That was and it was weird because I don't like playing as villains, but that game is great on the Game Boy. I would set it out if the batteries were dying, and it wouldn't just shut off on you like current game systems will, or they'll go into like a standby mode. The battery light would start to dim, then it would turn black. It would just go out, and then your screen would slowly start to fade out, and then you knew it was dead when you saw the little black line go across the screen. It would just kind of flash there for a couple times, and it was dead. So when it got to that point, I would let it set out in the sun. And I don't know what that did to the batteries, but that normally gave me like another 30 minutes of play until eventually it got to the point where, nope, not even solar charging could do it. And my Game Boy got horribly yellowed by staying in the sun. And I like dug it out a few years ago, repainted it, got a new screen on it, or not screen, but screen protector, screen cover. So yeah, Game Boy. You don't know how good people have it these days with handhelds, and especially playing, like, if you didn't have any kind of light source, forget it, because it didn't have a light on it.
And they didn't come out with like light attachments until the Game Boy Advance, right?
Well, the next console I got was the Game Boy Color, and by the way, and it was also a blurry screen. Like, there was so much ghosting from, like, something would move across and you'd see like this trail of like pixels just following. Super Mario Land was really bad because Mario would like fall like instantly, and you would just see like this like strand of Mario on the screen. I don't even know. Like, it's definitely not worth going back to play that way. The Game Boy Color, things got sharpened up, and it was a very reflective screen, but didn't have a built-in light. I had a little Nyko, it was called the Worm Light, and it plugged into the extension slot on the side of it, and it fed off the 2 AA batteries. That was also what was so cool about the Game Boy Color. Only 2 AA batteries this time to play it. And you had to kind of make it so that you could adjust the light so that it wouldn't shoot the glare of the light directly into your face, because then you wouldn't be able to see, so you kind of had to fiddle around with it. But that was really cool. And then I had something I think also made by Nyko called and I still have all this stuff, by the way, somewhere in a drawer. I think it's called the Shock and Rock. And not only it was a battery, rechargeable battery for it, gave you a bigger grip on the Game Boy Color, and also had stereo speakers and rumble. So it would plug into your, of course you'd have to take the battery cover off, hook it on, stick in the headphone jack thing, and it would basically rumble based on how loud the sounds were. So it, especially with Link's Awakening, it worked really well. Like, if you could adjust the sensitivity of the rumble so that it didn't just rumble when the music was playing, but when sound effects would happen, like hitting an enemy or getting hit, it actually worked. So I thought that was probably one of the coolest accessories for it. Game Boy Advance comes out. I got the original Game Boy Advance, and I hated it. Like the Game Gear style one. Oh, by the way, I also had a Game Gear growing up. Another horribly blurry screen that managed to be even worse than the Game Boy screen, but at least it had lighting on it. And I no longer have a Game Gear or my Game Gear library. I got rid of those. But that also had some worthy titles on it. But the Game Boy Advance, the original, was terrible. The graphics were so dark on it. It was, and it seemed like it was even less of a reflective screen than the Game Boy Color. Then they came out with and I think I actually bought like a modding kit to like add lighting to it. Worst decision I ever made. It ruined my Game Boy Advance. Well, then I got a Game Boy Advance SP, and there's actually 2 different models of the SP. A lot of people don't know this, but there's an SP with a reflective screen with a front light that I think you have to turn it on. It doesn't turn on by default. You actually have to hit the light button to turn it on. Also, the Advance SP rechargeable batteries. The original Game Boy Advance still had the 2AA requirement. Also, it had the clamshell. It introduced the clamshell. And when it was opened, it looked like the original Game Boy form factor, which I also loved about that. So the first Game Boy Advance SP, it was okay. The front light, the only thing I didn't... It was really good if you were in a car ride and the sun was beaming right on it, because it was reflective, and just the way that it worked, it played well in direct sunlight. Not all screens do, as you're aware with like a 2DS or anything with a backlight stinks in sunlight. But the original Game Boy Advance SP was pretty good with that. The only thing is, when you were playing in the dark and you had that light on, it made everything blue. Because it was like a blue LED light, I think. And it just kind of made everything have a blue tinge. And I was like, eh. Also, another innovator in electronics, no standard headphone jack on that. That was the one bad thing about the Game Boy Advance SP. No headphone jack. I actually have headphones for mine that fit into the charging port and will do audio through that. Audio is not the strongest point of the Game Boy Advance, though.
No. It did have... I remember they did have those wireless connector adapters that you could like put in, and it gave you the two like bumpers on it. I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, and it did actually. The Game Boy Advance added L and R as additional buttons to your A and B. But the second model of the Game Boy Advance SP is completely backlit. You basically just have two options for brightness, like not so bright and really bright. And that is, in my opinion, the best model of Game Boy you could possibly get. I love that the Game Boy Advance is, and by the way, Game Boy Advance is like my third favorite of any handheld. It plays every Game Boy game, every Game Boy Color game, every Game Boy Advance game, as such a huge library to play from. And this will come into play later. I loved how when you played, and this goes for Game Boy Color also, when the Game Boy Advance first boots up and it's like an original Game Boy game, it'll kind of have like a Game Boy Color boot up screen. And during that boot up screen, you can do different button combinations to pick if this is a original Game Boy game, you can pick the color palette to play so that it's not just black and white. But if you don't do anything, I think what they did just to make sure that the Game Boy games worked, all of them would work on the Game Boy Color going forward and the Game Boy Advance, they played like all 700 something original Game Boy games on a Game Boy Color. And when they did that, they went through, like, because there's about 20 different color palettes to choose from for those old games. They defaulted it so that it knows what game you're playing, and it'll do the best color palette for that game, which is pretty cool. The only thing I wish that the Game Boy Color did is for Super Game Boy games, which a lot of those were like in full color, and they looked like little Nintendo games playing on your Super Nintendo. They didn't just carry that over to the Game Boy Color. So, for example, Pokemon Red and Blue look like Pokemon Yellow on your Game Boy Color when you play them on a Super Game Boy. You put them into a Game Boy Color and the background is blue on Pokemon Blue and it's red on Pokemon Red. So I thought that was like, they could have fixed that. But it was still pretty neat that they had different palettes for the Game Boy games. So, love the Game Boy Advance. The sound was an issue. And the library is good, but it's not the best. So that's why it's my third favorite. Just the sound only was good on certain games. Love the fact that was actually the first time that I played games like A Link to the Past, all the way through Super Mario World, all the way through all the original Super Mario Brothers all the way through, or at least Super Mario Brothers 3 and 2. I'd beaten Super Mario Brothers when I was little. And then the DS came along. And not to rain on your parade, but I hated the DS. The DS, to me, and I still think this to this day, it's a weird system that did 2D exceptionally well and absolutely was terrible at 3D. Like the 3D in that most games that use 3D didn't even look as good as a PS1. There are some games that exceeded the PS1 in quality though, like 358 over 2 days. That was definitely one of them. And I think when the DSi came out, I thought about picking one up, but I was like, no. I liked the PSP. And the PSP literally and PSP is my second favorite handheld. PSP is literally like a portable PS2. The quality of the games easily matches anything that's on the PlayStation 2. The Final Fantasy games, Crisis Core, both Dissidias are incredible games. They had Sonic the Hedgehog games available for it. There was a Jak and Daxter spin-off Daxter game on there that's very good. There's the library of the PSP is far better than the PlayStation Vita. Like far, far better. Plus, that's when they introduced that you can download PS1 games digitally onto it. So that was just another bonus because you had digital downloads for it. The screen was great, and my complaint with the PSP is I had 3 of them. I had the 1000 model, got a scratch on the screen, and I couldn't live with it, so I traded it in for the 2000 model, which had a TV out for it, so you could play on your TV. I wore that one out. I actually wore the disc drive out playing Dissidia. So then I got the 3000 model, and now that one is soft modded. It has custom firmware on it. I've dumped my entire PSP library onto a micro SD memory card because now they make these adapters that you can plug into it. You don't have to have a PSP memory card for it. And it's an amazing system. It is definitely worth owning one to this day. The build quality is not the best though. And I've already had to replace the face buttons and the directional buttons on it once. It's nice that aftermarket stuff is available there, but Nintendo products don't do that. The buttons in my Game Boy that I still have, that I have had since I was 5 years old, still work. And I played that a lot more than my PSP. So build quality kind of makes the PSP not my favorite handheld. My absolute favorite handheld is the Nintendo 3DS. And I have owned pretty much every model of that except the, which is saying something. I think I've owned half of them, actually. I owned the original 3DS, the XL, and now the new Nintendo 3DS XL. And I've loved all 3 of them. I've not had the 2DS, I've not had the regular size new Nintendo 3DS, and I've not had the Nintendo 2DS XL. There's 6 different models out, which is crazy. I thought 4 models for the DS was a little bit crazy. The DS, DS Lite, DSi, DSi XL. I thought, okay, 3DS XL, great. We've already skipped it. We're at the XL model. Let me go grab that for Smash Brothers. And it's crazy. But yeah, the 3DS is incredible. Not only does it have it's got an amazing Super Mario 3D game. It's got Smash Brothers, let that sink in. Smash Brothers is on it, and it has as much content as as Melee does. So probably more, actually. I've probably played that more than anything else. It has amazing versions of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. It has quirky titles on it. It's basically, think of whatever the DS did, it does 1,000 times better. Again, I don't mean to rain on your parade, but
It's mostly nostalgia.
yeah, like that's what you grew up with. It does amazing 3D. It can push, PS2 quality 3D on there. It actually uses so it also opens up the DS library, because every 3DS/2DS model can play all of your DS games. So that's actually the first thing I did with the 3DS. While I was waiting for games to come out for it, I bought all the DS games that actually interested me. And it has some fairly cool ideas, especially with the dual screen, that translate really well to the 3DS. It's it's Nintendo quality, so it's not going to break on you. The library between those two games are huge. 3D is, I think once the 3DS is done and over with, we're not going to see 3D in a game system probably ever. I think it'll be done at that point. And it's a neat little thing. I got the original 3DS when it launched, so I actually have the ambassador certificate on mine. I've downloaded the Game Boy Advance games and the free NES games that came with it, which is why I know that the original 3DS can run Super Nintendo games just fine. It's stupid to have them only on the new models, but whatever. And the Virtual Console. So pretty much every single Game Boy game that's really worth playing is on there. My complaint with that, though, is they're all in black and white. There is no option to make them look like they do on a Game Boy Color. And I'm just like, really, Nintendo? Why would you not give us that option? Because there are Game Boy Color games that you can download on it. I know there's a Game Boy Color emulator on this thing. How come I cannot play a Game Boy game with at least a little bit of color? Nope, can't do it. So that's a big letdown. There's Game Gear games on there that you can download. There's Genesis games. There's Super Nintendo games. Basically the era that I grew up in, and then, in my opinion, they've basically released all of the Nintendo 64 games that I would want to play. Star Fox 64 3D is an excellent version of that game. Ocarina of Time, like I've said. Smash Brothers. Why would you play the original Super Smash Brothers on the 3DS when you have the 3DS version? I don't know. But Super Mario 64 DS is probably the definitive version of that game. It's an incredible system. It's Resident Evil Revelations, which is amazing. I'm not really even going to talk that much about the games, just because there's too many great games on there. Plus, you've got your choice of the litter when it comes to Pokemon games. And now you can do red, blue, yellow, gold, silver. Then you can go all the way back to the only thing that they're missing that they probably will never have on there is, because for some reason they don't do Game Boy Advance games, is Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald. So Gen 3 is pretty much the only generation you can't play on the 3DS, because you'll play all the DS ones and all the 3DS ones. So it's just shy of having the perfect Pokemon catalog of games. So it's an amazing system, and I stand by it. It is even better if I had to get rid of that or the PSP. It actually trumps the PSP. It really won me over, because I was very strongly a Sony handheld person. I have a Vita. The Vita's okay, but I'd say the Vita's probably number 5. The original Game Boy, I love it. never would go back to play it on like an never would go back and like play a full game on it. Like, I think when I have kids, I will show them like, hey, this is what your dad grew up playing, and they'll be like, ew, that's ugly. You're right, it is ugly. And just leave it at that.